As we know, volcanic activity has played a dominant role in shaping the face of the Earth. Much of the natural beauty of our land, its mineral wealth, and fertility of our soil, we owe to volcanism, especially in the western United States. At one time during the last 70 million years, volcanic rocks covered nearly all of the western states, including Washington, Oregon, California, Nevada, Arizona, Utah, Idaho, and large parts of Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, New Mexico, and Texas. Still other volcanic rocks, now largely deformed and metamorphosed, are found in nearly every state. In a general way, the older the rocks, the less well preserved are the features which allow us to interpret their origin. To best understand volcanoes and volcanic rocks, you must study the youngest samples. In the West, volcanism has been going on for millions of years, and so there are many examples to study. Some outstanding examples of well-preserved volcanic terrain are the Cascade Mountains in Washington, Oregon, and Northern California, where a few volcanoes may still be active. The Columbia River Plateau in Oregon and Washington, and the Yellowstone Park area in Montana and Wyoming. Others include the San Francisco Peaks and Sunset Crater in Arizona. Active volcanism in the United States is confined to the Hawaiian Islands, the Aleutian Islands, and the Alaska Peninsula. The Hawaiian Islands consist entirely of volcanic rocks that form giant shield volcanoes, one of which rises nearly 30,000 feet from the ocean floor. By far, the dominant rock type is dark gray to black basalt in the form of lava flows, cinder, pumice, ash, and bombs. On the island of Hawaii are the volcanoes Mauna Loa, the largest volcano in the world, and Kilauea, one of the most active. During the eruption at Kilauea in 1959, great fountains of lava, some as high as 1,900 feet, were observed near the volcano's summit. Lava from the fountains ran into an old pit crater and filled it to a depth of 365 feet, forming a lava lake. Late in 1963, nearly 4 years after the eruptions, the crust on top of the lake was nearly 50 feet thick, and the temperature of the lava below the crust was still 1,100 degrees centigrade, or some 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Kilauea is of special interest to the geologist because the erupted material comes from great depth and provides clues to the geochemical composition of the Earth. Furthermore, because of its frequent but relatively mild eruptions, Kilauea is a particularly good site for geochemical studies. On the summit of Kilauea, the United States Geological Survey maintains the Hawaiian Volcano Observatory. The observatory is located within Hawaii Volcanoes National Park. At the observatory, a team of geologists, geochemists, and geophysicists study every aspect of volcanic activity. Seismographs constantly record the tremors and earthquakes within and below the volcano, and tilt meters measure the contraction and expansion of the top of the volcano relative to the moving lava inside. In order to learn more about the internal constitution and formation of the Earth, chemists determine the chemical composition of the lava and gases, and petrologists and mineralogists study the minerals and rocks that crystallize from the lavas. The Aleutian Islands arc, including the Alaska Peninsula, is more than 2,000 miles long and contains about 36 active and many extinct volcanoes. The composite volcano Pavlov is a good example. Most of the lavas of the Aleutian volcanoes consists of black-gray rocks called basalts and andesites. Of the several active volcanoes on the Alaska Peninsula, Mount Katmai is the most notable because in 1912, one of the most remarkable eruptions of historic time occurred near its base. About 2 miles of ash and pumice erupted in the form of glowing ash flows and avalanches. In the Cascade Mountains in Washington, Oregon, and California are the well-known composite cones of Mount Baker, Rainier, Adams, Hood, Shasta, and the now famous Mount St. Helens. Practically without warning, Mount St. Helens erupted early Sunday morning, May 18, 1980. The eruption began with a gigantic explosion which hurled approximately 1 cubic mile of pulverized rock and ash almost 14 miles into the atmosphere. The force of the blast flattened trees and other vegetation in a fan-shaped area 8 miles long and 15 miles wide to the north of the mountain. Trees were uprooted or snapped off at ground level, stripped of their limbs and laid flat like millions of dominoes spreading out from the crater. With the blast came fast-moving flows of superheated steam, ash, and gases, incinerating vegetation in its path and starting forest fires on the mountain's flanks. Mud flows created by melted glacial ice and snow coursed down the mountainside to the north, flooding into the Toutle and Cowlitz river drainages. The flows gouged and filled the land into new forms as it moved. Blown to the east by prevailing winds, ash from the eruptions began a course across the United States. Cities in its immediate path, like Yakima, Washington, some 80 miles away, were heavily blanketed by the ash. These high Cascade volcanoes are built primarily of rocks called andesites. They fall in between the basalts and rhyolites in chemical composition. Andesitic volcanoes are usually great cones of rubble consisting of interlayered lava flows and fragmental deposits. Of special interest are the fragmental deposits called mud flows. These form when eruptions take place through crater lakes, when fragmental lavas and landslides enter streams, or when water from melting snow or rain saturates previously erupted deposits. Volcanic mud flows may be hot or cold and may deposit boulders weighing many tons. Very young mudflow deposits are common in the Mount St. Helens area. In some areas of the world, mud flows have been the major cause of destruction and loss of life during volcanic catastrophes. Mount Mazama is the volcano that lost most of its top about 7,000 years ago during a tremendous explosive eruption. Nearly 12 cubic miles of ash and pumice erupted, producing under a volcano a void so large that the top caved in to form a great hole 6 miles across. Depressions formed in the top of volcanoes in this manner are known as calderas. They differ from craters, which are produced by explosion rather than collapse. The caldera of Mount Mazama is now filled with water to a depth of over 1,700 feet and is known as Crater Lake. Technically, it should have been called Caldera Lake, but the early explorers were probably not geologists. Although most of the Cascade cones seem to be inactive, some are probably only dormant. This was certainly proven with the Mount St. Helens explosion. Lassen Peak, the southeasternmost volcano of the Cascade chain, was recently active with small eruptions in 1914 and 1915. Lassen Peak is famous among volcanoes because it is one of the largest known plug domes. A plug dome is part of a volcano formed by the vertical rise of a great sticky mass of lava, which remains standing above the crater rim. Commonly, great vertical grooves are formed on the margin of the dome as the material oozes from the opening. The mechanism may be compared to the squeezing of toothpaste from a tube. Later eruptions from plug domes are among the most dangerous known. Gases dissolved in the lava may burst forth, shattering the dome and causing the formation of fast-moving avalanches of hot blocks, rock, dust, and gas. Such avalanches may travel at speeds of up to 100 miles per hour and tear down and burn everything in their paths. It was an eruption of this type in 1902 from Mount Pelée in the West Indies, which destroyed the nearby town of Saint-Pierre and killed over 30,000 people. There are several areas in the United States where, for many thousands of years, the only activity has been that of hot springs, solfataras, or steam vents. Yellowstone National Park is the most famous of these areas, and it is visited each year by thousands of people who come to see the geysers, mud pots, boiling hot springs, steam vents, and beautiful carbonate and silica deposits formed by precipitation from the hot waters. Such phenomena are vestiges of a former period of very active volcanism and are commonly considered to represent the declining stages of volcanism. We cannot be sure, however, that someday more violent volcanic activity may not begin again. The youngest and dominant volcanic eruptions in Yellowstone National Park produce lavas called rhyolite. This material is high in silica and is the volcanic equivalent of granite. Among active volcanoes, rhyolite is extremely rare. In the geologic past, however, rhyolitic eruptions were more common and among the most spectacular of the natural phenomena. Over 600 cubic miles of rhyolite erupted from the Yellowstone volcanoes during the last active periods. So great was the volume of the ash flows and pumice that valleys were completely filled. The ash flows merged to form flat-top plateaus thousands of square miles in area. When deposited, these great sheets of ash were so hot that the particles fused together to form rocks known as welded tuffs. Recent geologic studies have revealed that welded tuffs are perhaps the most abundant rhyolitic rocks in the western United States. Tens of thousands of cubic miles are known in Nevada alone. Monocraters in California are excellent examples of rhyolitic volcanism. They are famous for black volcanic glass, also called obsidian, and for the large blocks of pumice that have recently become so popular as ornamental stones. Some cones are completely covered with lava flows that have piled up to form steep-sided lava domes. These cones containing lava did not overflow the crater rim. They are similar to plug domes, like those of Lassen Peak, but are much smaller, and the lavas are much more fluid. Recently, throughout geologic time, very fluid basaltic lava has erupted from swarms of fissures to form vast lava plateaus. The Columbia River Plateau of Washington and Oregon and the Snake River Plains of Idaho are among the finest examples of this type of volcanism. The Columbia River Plateau has an area of 100,000 square miles, and the total volume of basaltic lava approximates 35,000 cubic miles. Such lavas must have been almost as liquid as water to have covered such large areas so uniformly. On the northern edge of the Snake River Plains is the Crater of the Moon's National Monument. Here, basaltic layers erupted perhaps less than 2,000 years ago. The vents from which the lava came forth are localized on great fissures and show a wide variety of forms, ranging from cinder cones built entirely of very frothy red and black lava cinders to spatter cones formed by the piling up of lava blobs and droplets around the vent. Both A'a and Pohoi Hoi are found at Crater of the Moon. Pohoihoi lava and A'a lava are Hawaiian terms, adopted the world over for the two principal types of basaltic lavas. Pohoihoi is a very fluid lava with a smooth to ropey surface, and the flows may travel long distances. On the other hand, A'a is a more pasty lava and forms steep-sided flows, seemingly composed only of craggy blocks, but usually containing a continuous fluid interior. Occasionally, the surface and sides of these basaltic lava flows solidify to form a thick outer crust. Yet the hot lava inside continues its forward movement and eventually drains out of it its own crust to form lava tunnels and lava tubes. Water entering such tunnels may freeze in winter, and because of the excellent insulation properties provided by the basalt crust, they may not thaw in the summer, even under desert conditions. Excellent examples of ice caves and lava tunnels can be found at Sunset Crater National Monument in Arizona. Basaltic lava fields and cinder cones are numerous in many parts of the West. Some of these are isolated volcanic vents, but basaltic vents are commonly clustered near or around larger volcanoes composed of andesite. A fine example of the cluster types are the volcanic shields of the San Francisco Peaks in Arizona. Dr. Thomas Cassedevel of the U.S. Geological Survey Office, who has studied Mount St. Helens firsthand, explains some of the reasons that volcanoes occur in the western part of the United States.
There's a concept in geology that we call plate tectonics, and there are basic premise of plate tectonics is that the surface of the Earth is broken up into a number of plates that are fairly thin compared to their lateral dimensions, and these plates consist of material of different density. For example, material in the oceanic plates made up of basalt with a density of something greater than 2.7 grams per cubic centimeter. Material in the continental or lithospheric plates, or the continental plates, is material of density 2.4, 2.5. So there's again, you've got this contrast in specific gravity, and it turns out that the oceanic plates tend to be in the low portions of the crust or the Earth's lithosphere, and the continental plates tend to be in the high portions. But these plates are relatively mobile and free to move, one with respect to the other. And it's these relative motions which generate probably a lot of frictional heating, which cause melting of rocks. And melting of rocks produce material that's more buoyant, and this melted rock will tend to rise. And these form volcanoes. Now, the places where the plates are in collision or coming in contact, for example, the west coast of the United States, west coast of South America, the Aleutian Arc, Kamchatka Peninsula in Russia, Japan, the Philippines, all of those places occur at the contacts between plates that are in collision or convergent plate boundaries. And the oceanic plates typically ride under the continental plates. The more dense plate rides under the less dense plate. You get frictional heating, you generate magmas. Magmas come up along these linear zones. And in the United States, or in North America, this has its expression by the Rocky Mountain Belt.
Hundreds of other localities for volcanoes and volcanic rock are known, and this introduction simply serves to emphasize that the United States, particularly the West, has been one of the most active areas volcanically in the world in recent geologic time. Because we do not know the real causes of volcanism, we cannot say whether eruptions will occur in areas like New Mexico, Arizona, and Nevada. We can be sure, however, that in our lifetime, volcanoes in Alaska and Hawaii will erupt again.